Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be discussing 1031 exchanges. For a brief introduction, my name is Derek Hall. I'm a board member for the NAHREP South Queens chapter. I'm the government chair, also owner of a charter real estate school. On this call or this presentation, we've also got Maria Diaz, our chapter president. Wave to everybody, Maria. There we go. So today's presentation is going to be on 1031 exchanges. It's going to be a conversation with Rosa Collado, realtor with Keller Williams, and also Taso Pardalis, who's an attorney,
Hey.
Ironically enough, Pardalis and Novica. So they're going to be discussing the 1031 exchange. This conversation is sponsored by Citibank, and we have Martha Abrams, who we'll hear from a little bit later after the day's presentation. So we'll be talking about the ins and outs of the 1031 exchange process. You guys will be listening to the conversation between Rosa and Taso, but we will be having slides presented as well. So you'll be able to read and hear. Those of you that are members of the South Queens chapter of NAHREP, you'll be able to get a recorded copy of this presentation as well as the slides. If you're not a member, go ahead and join, and we'll get it to you as well. But right now, what we're showing you is a little bit of a brief introduction on the 1031 exchange process, about what the 1031 exchange is. And just because we do have an attorney on the line, here's the legalese at the bottom. Please be aware that this presentation is meant to provide basic information about tax-deferred exchanges and is not intended to be complete legal or financial advice. So you cannot sue anyone on this presentation. Try though you may. So we'll go ahead and jump into the next slide that gives you, again, a brief introduction on the 1031 exchange, talking about the IRS code, where you're basically able to exchange like-kind properties. If you do sell a property, you can buy a replacement property, and that way you can avoid your transfer taxes. And so here's just some information about the 1031 exchange. You guys can go ahead and read that.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's joining. Thank you, Taso, for your time. We know you're an expert here, so I am excited to ask you deep questions today. So let's go ahead, sir, with something basic. Tell us a little bit about what is 1031 exchange and why people should actually utilize the 1031 exchange.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Rosa and Derek and Maria and Martha and everybody for having me. I'm honored to be a part of your panel. So we'll just start off with the basics. You know, what exactly is a 1031 exchange? Well, in short, the 1031 exchange, also known as a like-kind exchange, is a process that allows a seller to defer paying capital gains tax on the sale of a property. So the seller does this by investing the entire sale amount into the purchase of a new property. And stripped down, it's when one property is swapped for another of like kind. So why do a 1031? Well, the main benefit of carrying out a 1031, rather than simply selling one property and then buying another, is the tax deferral. If you sell the property, you pay tax. If you buy another within 180 days, you can defer that tax and put it towards your second deal.
Okay, so let's say that the person is actually selling their property for $1 million. Do they have to buy the second property for $1 million, or does it have to be a little bit over or less?
Right. So the answer to that is that the debt and the value of the property and the debt must match. So if you're selling for $1 million, you must buy for $1 million to realize the full capital gains deferral. So if you have, for example, a property that's worth $1 million and you have a $200,000 mortgage, you must find in your second property a property that has, you know, $1 million with a $200,000 mortgage or $800,000. So your net numbers must match for you to realize the full capital gains. If your net numbers don't match, that's called the boot. You may hear that, you know, when you're talking in your transactions. The boot is if I sell something for 10 net and I can only find something to buy for 8 net, then the $2 difference is the boot, and you will be taxed on that $2 difference.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And now that we were talking about capital gain, if Derek, can you go back to the previous slide? please. Yep, just on capital gain and equity, if you can just kind of explain to us the difference. I know it's in writing there, but just curious.
Sure. So the capital gain, like it tells you there, is a profit from the sale of the property. You know, the equity is what you make on the deal. Okay. The capital gain you're deferring is, there's a difference between the fair market value of the property. So again, if the property is worth $10, and you sell it for $10, and the equity is 8, okay. You say you pay off your mortgage, whatever it is, you have 8 left. That's your net. You are, when you go to property 2 and you execute on your 1031, you're only going to capture the capital gains on the 8. You won't capture the capital gains on the 10. And so that's the difference between the capital gain and the equity.
Right. And then also when you sell a property, you're basically going to get capital. You're going to be paying taxes on the net, not the total
That's
amount,
right.
correct?
That's right. On the net.
Awesome. Next slide, please, Derek. So what actually qualifies? Because there's a lot of people that think, hey, it's depending, you know, I can just do a fix and flip, let's say, and then can I do a 1031 on an investment property that I just bought for 6 months? You know, people are thinking, can they do that with a 1031?
Right. So the test for that, and the most commonly used term, is the property must be a like kind property. Okay. So the original and the property 1 and property 2, the original and the replacement properties must be of, and this is a quote, okay, of the same nature or character, even if they're different in grade or quality. Okay. So for example, you could exchange a single family rental property. Okay. You can sell like a single family home that you're renting, and you could buy a commercial office building. That would be considered a like-kind exchange. You're receiving rent from both properties. They're both investment properties for rental income. Okay. You could sell a single family home and buy a vacation rental. Okay. A single family home that you're renting again. Okay. And buy a vacation rental. You could sell a vacation rental and buy a commercial building with a restaurant in it. The test is, you know, is it an investment property or not? All of those are real estate investment properties, and they're all like kind. The one thing you cannot do is you cannot 1031 in a residential property that you live in, the primary residence. There is no 1031 for primary residence, okay? But you can convert your primary residence to a rental property, and eventually you know, use that in a 1031 down the road if you do not live in it and you rent it, even if it was once your primary residence.
So how long do you have to hold that property or rent it for?
Yeah, so that's like the magic question that everyone wants to know the answer to. I think the safe rule of thumb is 1 year.
Okay.
I think, you know, when people come and they ask me, what should I do? I want to, you know, I'm going to move out of my home and I want to rent it. How long before I can 1031? You know, the answer safely is 1 year. A lot of people say 6 months. I like 1 year because you'll probably sign a 1-year lease with your tenant. And so it's pretty established at that point that that's a real tenant and he's been there for a year, and you won't have any questions from the IRS, right?
Right. We want to avoid the IRS. That's the plan,
that's right.
Harry.
That's right. We don't want that.
So, I mean, I do know how long does it take, but for people, how long does it take for you to actually identify a property and then find that replacement property?
Sure. So there is a 45/180 rule. And what that means is, so from the day that you sell property 1 and begin the 1031 process, you have 45 days to first identify the replacement property. So what does that mean? If my closing is today and I sell my building, I have 45 days to then say, okay, I'm going to acquire property X, and that will be my 1031 property. When we do that, we usually recommend, and people do, they identify 3 or 5 or however many properties. That way, if one falls apart, you move on to the next one. You don't lose your 1031. So you have 45 days from the day you close. Like if we close today, we have 45 days to identify the replacement property. You then have 180 days from the day of closing. So again, if we close today, we have 180 days to close on that property. If we do not identify within the 45 and we do not close within the 180, we cannot capture the 1031 tax deferral, and we'll have to pay taxes on the sale. Okay.
Got it. With everything that's happening right now with COVID-19, has there been any rules that have changed specifically with this, 180/45 rule?
Absolutely. So COVID has really, as you know, thrown the entire industry into a whirlwind. So normally the 45 and the 180 rule are completely strict. People have tried requesting extensions. You do not get extensions on it. But right now with COVID, it is the case that the 45 and the 180 are extended if either of those two timelines, the 45 or the 180, lands after April 1st. So if your 45 days came after April 1st, or your 180 days came after April 1st, you currently have until July 15th for both of those. So if you have not identified a property and you had until, let's say, April 15th, you now have until July 15th. If you had not closed and you had until April 15th, or you had a closing on April 15th, you now have until July 15th. We don't know if that's going to be extended, but that is the case right now. And it's only for people who fall after April 1st.
So they can't, okay. So, with now being May, can they still use it for July? If they were to close, let's say tomorrow, they'll still be qualified for that, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, great. And I also we did wanted to ask you, what are the mistakes that you've seen that clients should avoid?
The residential one is probably the first one that everybody gets caught up with. People say, okay, I'm living in this house and I want to 1031, and they proceed to come up with plans of how they're going to do that aren't necessarily the best plans. And sometimes, you'll have like a single family home that you live in, possibly with, like, you'll see this in Queens a lot, of course, right? And you'll see it with an illegal basement. So
Right.
They'll rent the illegal basement, they'll call it a rental property, they'll even show that rental income, and then they'll say, okay, it's a 1031 deal. However, you cannot live in it and call it a 1031 deal. And people often get ripped out of the 1031 bubble and have to pay the capital gains tax in that scenario. So that's probably the main one. You also see people who this isn't so much, I guess it's a common pitfall, but people aren't in a rush to identify. They believe they have a lot of time, or they only identify one property and they say, oh, this is the one I'm buying, and then something happens and that property falls apart. So they're pretty silly mistakes, but they're very common and they happen all the time. So I would be on the lookout for those two mainly.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Let's keep everything honest, right? And that's that line on our taxes to make this possible. That's what it's telling me. Now, can you, with identifying the properties, what are the rules that you can go over with basically what qualifies someone for the 1031 exchange? I know you mentioned having 3 properties, which we see here, the 3 property rule. So if you can go over more detail, the other 2, for the audience.
I'm sorry, could you just ask that again, Rosa?
I said, if you can go over the rules identification, like we do know that, hey, you want to do the 3 property rule, which means you identify 3 properties.
I see. Okay.
The 200 rule, the 95% exception rule.
Sure. So for the 45 days, you have the 3 property rule, you're identifying the 3. I always recommend that people actually, without formally identifying, target 5, because sometimes the 3 fall apart and you can try to then put in an alternate one. As far as the 200% rule, which you see there on your screen, it's pretty self-explanatory, but the fair market value can't exceed 200% of the relinquished property. So if you're selling the property for $10, you can never select properties that will exceed over $200. Okay, and then you have the 95% exception, which basically states that you can still qualify if you can acquire 95% of the value of all the properties identified. So if you've identified, multiple properties for the acquisition, let's say you've sold 1 and you've identified, 4, you can still qualify for the 1031 if you've acquired 95% of that. Let's say 1 falls apart or some percentage falls apart. Okay.
So can you clarify this with me too? So for me, let's say I sell my property for $1 million and now I want to buy 4 property, and let's say I'm cashing out $1 million. I don't know anything. So I have $1 million and I have 4 property, one at 200, one at 400, another one at 2, basically 4 property equaling $1 million. You could still buy those 4 property with a 1031 exchange, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
All right. Next slide, please, Derek.
Actually, this is a good time to jump in. We did have a question from the audience. I think it's a pretty good question. So let's go ahead and try to address that one real quick. It's
right.
What about sellers that want to use some of their proceeds? How do they take some of the proceeds out when doing a 1031 exchange? And what are the tax implications would be?
Sure. It's funny. I just had this last week. So we had a seller doing probably one of the more complex 1031s I've ever worked on. There were multiple sellers and multiple LLCs and multiple identified properties. But one of the sellers, like many sellers right now, they needed money immediately to operate and to pay mortgages. And, they had commercial tenants who weren't paying and all sorts of things. And so that seller said, look, I want to 1031, I don't know, most of it, but I also need money. So I'm going to cut myself a check out of this deal. And basically they created their own boot. And let's say the deal was, $10 again. They took a check for $2, in their name so that they could use to pay their bills. And that $2, they will pay capital gains tax on that $2 in this scenario. So you can take money out of your 1031 and keep, some percentage of it in. You will just pay the capital gains on that amount that you've taken out.
Is there any other questions, Eric, or should we jump into the presentation again? Oh.
I'm checking right now. We got a couple of things in the Q&A. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
So while you're checking, let's go over the 4 methods of exchanging. Taso, if you can just go over the detail of each one of them.
Sure. Let me just.
The first one we have.
So the first is the deferred exchange. Okay, that's the most common. It's the delayed exchange. Sorry, guys, I forgot to put my phone on mute before we began.
Don't worry about it.
So the first is the delayed exchange and the deferred exchange, and that is the most common. That's the one you see all the time. Okay, this is when the seller, the exchangor, they relinquish the original property. They sell the property 1 before they acquire property 2, and this is where the 45 and the 180 rule kick in. So they have to identify after the sale of property 1, they have to identify property 2, and then they have to acquire property 2 within 180 days of the sale. Most common, that's called the delayed exchange or the deferred exchange. The second, which you don't see as often, especially these days, especially in New York City, where things are super complex as compared to everywhere else, is the simultaneous exchange, or what we call the swap, or the deed swap, or the 2-party trade. So in the simultaneous exchange, the replacement property and the relinquished property close or transfer or swap in the same transaction or in the same day. And you'll typically have 2 parties that show up to a table and say, okay, I'm going to give you mine and you give me yours. And we don't have to pay any capital gains tax on that, right? This is really, really difficult, and it's not difficult to do. It's just very rare to find, because you basically have to find someone who wants exactly what you have at the exact same time that you want what they have. And in this market, and with the numbers and the debts and the management issues that you deal with in New York City, it's very hard to say, oh, I really want what you have, and you must really want what I have at this exact same 180-day window, right? So you don't see it much. Also, on the simultaneous swap and the simultaneous exchange, the debt and the equity of both properties also have to match. So not only do you have to really want that property, and they have to really want yours, but does the timing have to be perfect? But the debt and the equity have to match. So again, you have to have that net that matches between the 2 people swapping deeds. So it has to be a $10 for a $10.
So they can't, one of them cannot get a mortgage, let's say, and say, hey, I'm going to pay a little bit more for your home. Can they still do that?
Yes, that's something that takes place. We don't see these as much anymore. Where we see these really lately I would say in the last 10 years. So you see them in larger family inherited portfolios where families are splitting up properties, and maybe in portfolios where partners have built a portfolio together over the years, but now they want to separate and each kind of go their own way. And that's usually where you see it. So, if my parents, and their brothers left us a bunch of houses, and now there's three of us, at some point we might say, all right, look, I want property A, you want property B, sister wants property C. I'll give you mine, you give me yours, and you kind of do the 1031 deed swap. That's usually where it makes sense.
I do have a question with you with partnership. Let's just say that there are two partners that brought a property together, and one of them wants to do a 1031 exchange. The other one does not want to do a 1031 exchange. What happens then?
You can still complete a partial 1031 for your interest in the property. So it is doable.
But do you have to do that ahead of time, or you could do that, let's say, let's say a week before the closing? Can you still do that?
Yeah, you can still do it. Yeah, it's tricky, but it's definitely done. Usually what you see is a buyout and then a deal. I think that's been more common, like, okay, I'll just pay you and then I'll do the full 1031. But you can also do it as part of the deal or a week before, like you said.
Okay, perfect. Now, I do have another question really quick. I have a client that I'm selling her house, and in her taxes, she's saying that it's a husband and wife. They both own the property. So the husband's saying, I live in this property. And the wife is saying, well, that's my rental property. So now she wants to do a 1031. And I'm curious because I don't really think she can do an entire 1031 on the sale of that property.
Are they married?
They're married.
Right. I don't want to give accounting advice, but I think it depends how they file tax returns. Do they file as joint, tenants as a married couple, or do they file as, tenants, separate tax returns, and do they own the property as tenants in common, or do they own it jointly? So there's a pretty deep analysis there of how they hold the deed, how they file taxes, and if it plays out a certain way where they are truly tenants in common and where they do not file joint taxes, then maybe. But if they're still married, probably not.
Exactly. So if she was to say, hey, I'm just going to do 1031 on my part, the government's going to be like, no way.
Risky. Yeah, risky. I wouldn't recommend it. I would say, please don't do it. If that person were sitting right here,
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let's continue with reverse exchange.
All right. So the reverse exchange, this is a fun one to talk about. You see it sometimes, but again, it's not that common. But so basically it's a buy first and then capture the tax benefit later. And you basically, the person who's going to sell a property doesn't sell. He goes and he buys the replacement property first. So you acquire property 2 before you purchase property 1. And you do this through a qualified intermediary or an exchange accommodation title holder, which is like a title company / 1031 company hybrid, right? And you do this before you sell property 1 again. So, you think you want to do a 1031. You're saying, okay, look, I'll probably do one in the next couple of months. I'm going to sell this and I want to do a 1031. But then all of a sudden, the deal of the decade pops up, right? And some broker comes and he says, oh, I've got this deal and it's, and they have to get out and they're going to give it to you at a 25% discount. And you say, oh my gosh, I want to do a 1031, but I know that if I try to sell and wait to 180, this property will be gone, right? So you can actually, because you don't want to lose it by waiting to sell it, you can purchase it now, okay? You can buy it immediately through the 1031 / title company, and you secure that, and then you sell property 1, and you capture the 1031 benefit, as long as you've labeled it up front and said what you were going to do and put those funds aside and kept it all. And it still has to be done within the 180 days.
Oh, still again with that 180 days. So that makes it becomes a little tricky because, okay, you bought your home. Now you got to make sure you sell that home in 180 days. And then also what can come in play is who's going to lend this person the money to buy that first home. Because
that's really the tougher play. And that's why you see this mostly with cash buyers or people who are very liquid. People could go to a hard money lender, I suppose, but there's different rates and all sorts of different headaches there as well. So, all
right, perfect, thank you. And then the construction or improvement exchange, one of my favorites.
Yeah, this one's awesome. So let's say basically a party can use their tax deferred dollars to enhance the replacement property. So this is done while it's still in the hands of the 1031 qualified intermediary, okay? And it's done within the 180-day period. So I sell a property for 10, again, right? I keep going back to the $10 model. So I sell my property for 10. I find another property, but it's only for 8, which means I would normally have a $2 boot, and I would have to pay taxes on that $2. But so I sell my property for 10, and while I have the 180-day window, instead of paying taxes on the $2 boot, I acquire property 2, and I use the $2 boot to make improvements. I fix the roof, I point the bricks, I put a new fire escape on it, or whatever it is. Then I can still capture the full 10, and I don't pay capital gains on the $2 boot. So if you spend the boot on improvements for property 2 in the 180-day window, then you can capture all of it.
I love that one. Great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
If we can go to the next slide, just because we are tight with time. So we have about 5 more minutes. You and I, Taso, and we'll start asking questions. Yes.
Rosa, sorry. We have 2 questions. I don't know if you guys have time to answer these 2.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, so we have one from Ari Morales. So if you have an investment property where you rent and you also use it as your primary residence, you can do a 1031 exchange, and that is a 6-family home.
You know, the answer generally is no, but with a 6-family home, you can do it. You know, I was speaking more about primary residences, like residential households, single families, or with illegal units. In a 6-family, you should be able to capture a portion of it, because it's mainly an investment property. You have 5 incomes coming in other than your own. You may not be able to capture all of it. You might be excluded, your unit, but you should be able to capture on the other 5, Ari.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Taso. And last one from Jason Howard. Is there a minimum amount of time you must hold the first property? Example, if you do a flip and selling property in about 6 to 8 months from when acquired?
That's a good question. I don't think that there is. I just can't remember offhand. But no, I think you can just keep buying and flipping under the 1031.
Thank you so much, guys.
What was the gentleman's name that asked that question? I'm sorry.
Jason Howard.
Jason, I'm going to get back to you because I just can't remember offhand, and I don't want to give you the wrong answer, but I'll get back to you on the minimum hold period, okay? So I'll write it into the comments.
Perfect. Okay. Rosa, you can continue.
All right. So what I have on the other slides is just really basic rules for people to remember. Like Derek said at the beginning, all these slides will be available if you are a member or you decide to join as a member. Now, I did want to just to go over quickly a QI and what is a QI, and do they need to have a policy? So people could understand that. I know what it means, but you know, for some that don't, if you can elaborate on a QI.
Sure. So the qualified intermediary, the QI, is a company that basically takes the money from the sale of property 1 and holds on to it and ensures that the seller of property 1 doesn't have that money to use it, and that money is not used anywhere except for the acquisition of property 2. And so the QI, you know, provides written instruction to the closing officers. They prepare the 1031 exchange agreements. They prepare 1031 exchange transfer documents, and basically they insulate and protect the seller from any tax liability, and they make sure that you stay away from shooting yourself in the foot on your own deal.
And where do they, what do the QI do with that money? Can they just release it at any time, or it's just specifically for the purchase of the unit?
The money can be held in a holding company, and it can be invested in money market and other investments, but as long as it's accessible, then they're fine.
Okay, so the homeowner can just say, hey, release some money for me, right? They can't do that, or can they?
They can, but that money would get taxed.
All right, perfect. Well,
Right.
those are all my questions. I don't know if we have any more questions, Maria.
Just to go back to Jason's question, again, I'll get back to you, Jason, on the hold period. The thing is, if you're a regular buyer and flipper, there are minimum hold periods. If you're just doing 1031, I think you're okay, and I'll get back. But if you keep buying and flipping without holding and keep capturing 1031 tax benefit, then you can be considered what's called a dealer. And I think you have to be a little bit more careful there. But if it's just for your one deal, then I think you're okay.
But do you know how long he has to hold it? He's thinking maybe.
If you're doing volume transactions, I think it's like a 2-year.
Got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
he wouldn't qualify with the other one where you said, hey, you have to hold that property for an entire year. It will be different then?
That's different. I was talking about converting a primary residence to a rental.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So you just want to establish that it's not your primary residence. And I think that would take a year.
All right, perfect. I think I'm good with that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to leave us with. If Derek, if you can go to the last slide, just so people can get Taso's information as well in case they have more questions.
Yes,
Wow,
and
look at that.
actually, Rosa, sorry, I have one last question that just came in. It's saying, what about sellers that want to use some of their proceeds? How do they take some proceeds out when doing a 1031 exchange? And what is the tax implications they will have?
Sure. The seller can take their proceeds as they're exchanging, especially as they're buying property too. The tax implications are on whatever portion of proceeds that you remove from the 1031 equation, you will pay capital gains tax on that portion.
Awesome. Perfect.
So is there anything you want to leave us with, or just tell us a little bit about who you are at the end? I didn't let you do that at the beginning because of timing.
I did want to just give something away. It's not 1031 related, but for a lot of you, people are especially here at our office, we've converted to escrow closings and virtual closings amid the COVID-19 crisis. And, I know a lot of people are catching up to that now, and a lot of brokers and law firms are going through virtual walkthroughs and virtual closings and the whole nine. I think that's something really important, in case you guys haven't seen it, is that there's an executive order from Governor Cuomo allowing virtual notarizations. And this was really the big impediment to a virtual closing, because you could set up everything, signatures via DocuSign or FedEx, but the notary always had to be there to witness the buyer and the seller and the title company sign the documents. And with the Virtual Notary Act, you can do that by video now. And, as long as you follow the same procedures that you would follow when you're notarizing the document live, that notary will count. You do have to deliver the actual notary within 30 days, but you can just FedEx it over or whatever. So, I have a step-by-step procedure for that. And I even have a little certification that I've prepared for people that are doing virtual notary. We were, I think, one of the first firms to do it, and we were published on it way early. So if anybody wants that, you guys can just email me and I'll send you the certification. You can use it every time you trigger a virtual notary, okay?
Yeah, please send that over to us, because what we're doing at the end is that we're going to go ahead and make this presentation available for everyone that attended, and especially for our members, we're going to provide them with the presentation as well as with that information you just said you will provide for us. So
Awesome. I'll send it over to you right after we log off here.
Great, thank you so much. Maria, do we have any more questions?
No more questions.
All right, great. So I think this will be Taso. Again, I really want to appreciate you for your time. Great conversation today. You're very knowledgeable, so I appreciate you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. I hope everyone's safe and well, and hopefully we'll get to meet everyone in person one day.
That's right. Thanks a lot, guys. It was a great presentation. Maria, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about NAHREP, our board, and then we'll bring in Martha to close us out?
Yes, of course. Well, first I want to say thank you so much, for everyone to, be here. I know it's really hard right now with this crisis that it's going on, but I really appreciate everyone that took the time. And I see that we have a lot of our new members, which I'm really happy. I'm excited. And, you know, we're doing this for you guys so we could bring as many content as we can right now. And, you know, just trying to help a little bit with whatever we can. I also want to say, please stay tuned. We're going to have our next webinar next month on grants. So if you want more info, let us know. We're also going to send you emails. And now I want to say thank you to Martha Abrams. She's our annual sponsor from Citibank. I know she wanted to take a couple minutes to say thank you and say just something a little bit about her. Martha?
Martha, hold on, you're on mute. There you go.
There you go. Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. I had my 3-year-old grandson running around, so I wanted to make sure you guys didn't hear him screaming, "Wela, wela." So again, thank you. I'm so glad to see all of you doing healthy and you all look well. And you know, things are very, very different. So we're doing so many different things to stay engaged. And I'm glad that Maria, that you're doing some of it like this to keep the realtors engaged, the loan officers engaged. We're not letting this pandemic stop us from networking, from engaging our clients, from you know, just learning. I've taken this opportunity to learn so much. This is about, I think about my 6th or 7th webinar that I've joined to learn. Right now, I think we have about either 3 or 4 loan officers that also joined. I knew nothing about 1031 exchanges, and I've been in the mortgage business for over 25 years, but it's not something that I ever learned. So thank you for that. So the loan officers are in the branches or they're working remotely. The rates have been very low. So loan officers are busy helping clients get lower rates. So putting them in a better financial situation and helping new homeowners. For those clients that are affected by the COVID, Citibank has been very, very active in helping them. So they can either call the number on the statement for whatever account it is that they need help on. We're doing things from fee waivers to forbearance, but again, they have to reach out either through the website, calling the number, or stopping in at a branch. For prospective home buyers, we normally do home buyer seminars in the branches. Obviously, that's not feasible right now, but we are doing, again, webinars. This is something that we're trying. We did them with the nonprofits. We've done a few with the nonprofits, but this we're trying on our own. If anyone is interested, reach out to one of our loan officers. We have the first one coming up. I think it's the 26th or the 27th. Again, it's a great time for people to, because we have this extra time, to get educated. Again, I did a webinar on wills and estates that I was, again, I wanted to learn more about it. And I realized I need to get my will drawn up. So, you know, doing Zumba classes and all of these things that I never had the time for. And now with the less commute, we have extra time. So again, I wanted to thank you again for doing this. NAHREP has done a phenomenal job. And again, we're here, we're happy to sponsor. I actually was on the original board of NAHREP New York. Most of you must know Carmen Mercado. So Carmen and I were on the original board. We knew nothing about NAHREP. We didn't know what was deductible, what wasn't. We knew nothing, but we learned. And I'm glad that I don't even remember how many years, definitely more than 15 or 16 years. I'm glad that we stuck it out. And I'm glad to see, I mean, how much the organization has grown, what great content of information you guys offer. And again, always happy to be associated with you guys. And Maria, thank you so much. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much. Guys, you did an awesome job. Taso, if I was a little bit confused with 1031 exchange, I think we're pretty much pros now.
Oh, thank you guys. I have way more. So so feel free to reach out. I left my my email and my cell phone in the chat there in case anybody has any questions. Okay.
I think we've got a little extra time if you guys want. Like Rosa, if you have another question or two for Taso, we can wrap it up on a high note if you'd like.
Well, if anything, I wanted just to also, well, I do have a question for you, Taso. So I definitely do want to just kind of remind everyone to please become a member. We will be giving the slides, which has a lot of information that Taso and I put together. So please make sure that you guys sign up and we'll send that over to you. Now, I do have a question for you, Taso.
Yes.
So construction exchange, can you go a little bit over that? Can you buy, let's say that, can you do a 1031 exchange? Let's say that I sell my property, I have a land, and now I want to start building in that land. Can I use a 1031 exchange to start new construction?
You can, and the net or any boot can also be used towards that.
So when you were saying the boot again, I'm just one of the last one, promise. This is the
Yeah,
last
sure.
one.
So if you sell a property for $10
Mhm.
and the target property is less than 10, because you know the net of each property has to match, right? So you have to sell for 10, buy for 10 net, right? But if you can't find something to buy for 10 net, and let's say you find something where you have to buy for 8, but you sold for 10, the $2 difference is the boot, right? That's called the boot. And you normally have to pay taxes on that $2, but you can use that $2 for construction and improvement of the acquiring property so that you don't have to pay taxes on the $2. So if you sell for 10 and you buy for 8, normally you pay tax on the 2, but you can take that 2 and invest it into construction and improvement and development of property 2, and then you will not have to pay taxes on the full 10.
Now, does it have to be that specific property that you did the 1031 exchange on, or can you buy another property and use that on that one as well for construction?
You can buy another and use it, as long as you've identified it and it's one of the ones you acquired in the 180 days, right?
Again, that 45 and 180 days, we got to stay in that limit.
Yeah, yeah. You can't just go to a random one that's not part of that process, right?
Perfect. Well, those are all my questions. Thank you, Taso,
Awesome.
again, for answering those.
Thanks, guys. The questions were really good, actually. I usually don't stumble. I stumbled once or twice on these, so that means they were really good.
You got a
But
good
by the
group
way,
here.
to Jason, there is no minimum hold period as long as you're not, considered a dealer, which is a buy and flip and a buy and flip repeat. Okay.
So let me ask you about the buy and flip. So I purchased a property, I flipped the property, but yet I bought it like it was going to be my primary because I was going to get that 3.5% down payment. So I can't do a 1031 exchange on that at all.
No, you should not.
Actually, it's a good question, follow up about what you were asking about the boot. So when you're investing the boot in construction, does that have to be done within the 180 days?
Yes, it all has to be done within the 180 days.
The construction doesn't have to be completed in that time. You just have to put the money towards it.
That's right. You have to buy the materials or put it into the project or whatever it is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Joanna. All right, so we have just a couple of minutes left. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to include those in the Q&A or in the chat, and then we'll get to it. Because we've got a lot of great questions throughout, as Taso said. Sorry, go ahead, Martha.
No, I saw something come through asking for my contact information. I'll send it to Maria so she can send it out with the slides so that everyone can have it.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Awesome. This was really great, guys. Thanks for letting me participate.
See, the content was so good, they don't even have any questions. All their questions.
Yeah, we answered everything before they could ask it.
Even things they didn't even know to ask, right? And then they're answered. So that's great.
There you go. All right, so let's release everybody back to the wild then.
Awesome.
Participation. We've got
everyone.
Taso Pardalis, we've got Martha Abrams, we've got Maria Diaz, we've got Rosa Collado. I want to thank everybody for joining us on today's webinar. Again, NAHREP South Queens, go ahead and check us out. Our information is in the chat. You can go check out our website, register, become a member. You'll get a copy of the slides from today's presentation, as well as the video. And you get to hang out with cool people like our board members right here. So thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll catch you in June for our next webinar session on grants. So stay tuned for information on that. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Awesome. Stay
Bye,
safe,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.